Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura. Today I'm going to talk to you about the 5 favorite manga that I read in the month of March. All of these manga were new to me, like first time reads. They aren't all new releases, but some of them are, and definitely I would recommend them. I don't know that I recommend them to everyone, but I will tell you about them and who I think would like to read them. So you may or may not have noticed that I've been away for a month. I've just been off sick and I haven't been able to film videos, but I seem to be getting better, and if this video works I'm going to continue posting videos, and I have quite a few ideas of what I want to be posting, so you can look forward to that in the future. But anyway, I am going to just get right into the 5 books that I read in March that I thought were the best. You know, I probably read about, I don't know, probably 50 or so volumes of manga. I can't remember. I read quite a few, and so these are my 5 favorite picks, I guess. So the first title I'm going to talk to you about is Jacko the Galactic Patrolman by Akira Toriyama. You should be aware, especially since you're visiting my channel, so I'm assuming you are, that Akira Toriyama is the author of Dragon Ball Z, and a number of other titles, including Dr. Slump, which is probably his other biggest work. So Jacko is the story of sort of alien police officer, and he's coming to Earth because the police force is aware that some disastrous event is going to happen on Earth, and he's supposed to come to Earth and prevent it, or sort of make a judgment on whether or not maybe Earth should just be destroyed. And so in his pursuit of sort of justice, I guess, he crash lands his spaceship on a deserted island, which is deserted except for one lonely hermit man who sort of has given up on the human race, and he lives there alone, obviously. He doesn't want to be around with other people, but he is an inventor, and so he's very smart, and he helps Jacko out by sort of repairing his spaceship, and they kind of form an unlikely friendship. It's not very unlikely if you've read any of other Akira Toriyama's other works. It's actually a pretty typical scenario of a naive yet powerful main character kind of teaming up or becoming friends with a grumpy hermit. Like, just think of any Toriyama work that you've read and tell me if that's not true. Anyway, the reason that I found that this story was so fun was just sort of how surprising it was that it kind of paralleled, or it crossed over with the Dragon Ball world. He does land on the Dragon Ball Earth. So a lot of the characters and a lot of the scenarios that happen in Dragon Ball are mentioned in this book. I certainly think that if you haven't read Dragon Ball, you probably could enjoy this. But if you've read Dragon Ball and you enjoy Dragon Ball, you should read this because you will love it. It's really funny, it's really charming, it's kind of predictable, but you know, I loved every minute of it, and it's just such a joy to read Toriyama's works. And yeah, this one is just an absolute delight. There's one bit about this book that I loved, or about Jacko, that I loved so much, and it's just that Jacko thinks really highly of himself, and so he tends to pose a lot, you know, because he thinks he's really cool, and the way that he poses is really reminiscent of the Ginyu Force from Dragon Ball Z, you know, the Frieza saga, and I just thought it was hilarious, and I loved it. And I think, you know, if you love Dragon Ball at all, you should definitely read this one, because I think you will find it delightful. So the next book that I recommend is The Ice Wanderer and Other Stories by Jiro Taniguchi. He's the author and illustrator of this work. It's a number of short stories, and they're in homage to Jack London's works. So like White Fang and Call of the Wild. And I read Call of the Wild when I was in 8th grade. I remember doing a book report on it and hating it, but I liked this. So essentially what these are, they're a bunch of survival stories mostly. There are a couple of others, but sort of the primary first handful are survival stories about, you know, like Gold Rush or Klondike days, living in Alaskan wilderness. There's dog sledding, you know, across the wilderness. There's just a bunch of ones where it's sort of trying man versus nature type stories. There is one that's sort of out of place that really doesn't have anything to do with nature at all, and it's a story about an author who lives in an apartment complex, and it's really just it doesn't really make a lot of sense in this collection. And then the very final story is a story about a man and sort of his fascination with blue whales. So here's the illustration from it. It's really, his art is really beautiful. It's really detailed. He definitely knows how to draw and render nature. So I'm definitely excited about reading more works of his. And I would like to see more stories from him, because I don't know if storytelling is his strongest point. You know, the fact that he's working off of Jack London stories in a lot of these, I'm not entirely sure that it's his storytelling so much. I would like to see ones where it's more definitely his original works, but his art style is really beautiful, and I think that anyone, even non-manga readers, would enjoy this collection. The reason that I had originally picked this up was because I'm always sort of interested in seeing manga depict other places besides Japan, besides sort of fantasy worlds, and in this one they come to basically the Great White North, including the Canadian wilds as well as Alaska, and that just really kind of excites me because those are close to home. So I just really enjoy this kind of thing, and I think anyone would enjoy this collection. A new release, Orange by Ichigo Takano. This is an omnibus collection of volume 1, and there's supposed to be a second volume coming out, I believe, this year. And I think then that's going to be it. So it's going to be fairly easy to collect, so if you're interested, this is a good time to come into it. This is a story about a young woman. She's 16 in high school, and she receives a letter from herself 10 years down the road, and her, older self has some regrets about a student that was in their class, and she wants her young self to rectify the situation. So she's written this letter, and it basically details their days and what happens on those days and how she should approach each situation. And so the girl kind of makes decisions whether or not she's going to follow along or not. And it's just a really interesting story. I think it's got a really good premise, and it just shows friendship in a really, really sort of moving way, in a different way than I think a lot. Like, it's not superficial friendship. This is real, like, true friendship, and I think that it's displayed in a really nice way. There's a lot of sadness, definitely. It's touching, but there's a lot of hope coming into the end of this volume, and even though it's a shoujo series, I don't think you should be limited to that demographic. I think a lot of people would enjoy this series, so I'm really looking forward to reading the end of this, and I highly recommend it. So the next title that I recommend, but I only recommend this to a select few, is Seraphim 26661333 Six Wings by Mamoru Oshii and Satoshi Kon. And this is a post-apocalyptic tale about a world that is basically the human population is just dying out because of a plague that is just, hundreds of thousands of people have died, but when you contract this plague, there's no way to stop it, and there's sort of an odd side effect that you kind of begin growing wings as well as sort of just going mad. So it's this really horrible thing. In addition to the plague and the sort of the post-apocalyptic tale, it's also an alternate history retelling of sort of different results of World War II, and so those kind of things play in together. But more than even that, on top of that, it's just sort of steeped in Judeo-Christian symbolism. This is one of those titles that is an incredibly deep read, because you don't have to look very far for the symbols, but you can read so deeply into every scenario. And it's like, it's just a layer upon layer of storytelling in this. The art is incredibly beautiful, and then the one stopping point which would prevent, I think, your average reader from reading this manga, is that it's incomplete, and it never will be complete. Mamoru Oshii and Satoshi Kon are two renowned anime directors, but before they were both really popular, they wrote this together, and as two sort of geniuses often do, they butt heads, and they ended up splitting up, and so they were unable to complete it. And now with Satoshi Kon passing away, it's an impossibility for this to continue, which is just a shame, because it is so amazing, it is so gripping and interesting, and from the first page I was so hooked into this. I really actually bought this on a whim. I didn't know anything about it when I bought it. I picked it up because of the image on the cover. You can see I thought that this was actually going to be pulling in symbolism from, or storytelling, at least from First Nations culture and mythology, just because of the clothing that she was wearing, and maybe it was going to. And as I had mentioned before, I really like to see manga kind of take other cultures and touch on them a little bit. This one definitely does, but it doesn't really deal with that First Nation aspect that I was kind of expecting, which is fine. Like, it's fine. I'd like to see some manga like that, definitely. If you have suggestions, I would totally be all in for that. But I was just totally hooked with this. I love manga that makes you really think about it, and you can see all the aspects, and you can see where the story is going just because of how it was constructed. I think it was really, it's brilliant, and I can't really praise this one enough. Anyway, I love it. If you like to read for symbolism, if you like to see deeper meaning in manga, then definitely this is for you. If you are a Kon or Oshii otaku, then I definitely think this is for you. Maybe if you're a manga collector, this is for you. But apart from that, I wouldn't actually recommend this title. I think it's just it's kind of more niche, but genius. And that one was genius, but this one was my favorite. Yonen Mu, or Junji Ito's Cat Diary. I love Junji Ito. He's a horror author. He has Gyo and Uzumaki, those are his most famous, I guess. And both of those horror manga tend to have a little bit of a comedic bent. They're a little bit funny. You probably feel like you're not supposed to be laughing, but there's just something funny about them, and so I really, really enjoy them. This one is the opposite. It is full comedy with a little bit of a horror bent, and it's just glorious. It is perfection. This is an autobiographical work about his fiancée coming to live with him, and she brings along her cat. And Junji Ito is really unimpressed. He does not want to be a cat owner. He just bought a brand new house. He doesn't like cats. And the cat she's bringing is Yon, who just happens to be extra creepy and ugly, according to Ito. And you may not know, but Yon is the number 4 in Japan, and the number 4 is actually an unlucky number. So on top of that, it's also been named Unlucky. So he's getting this unlucky cat coming to his house. And then when Yon comes to stay, the fiancée decides she doesn't want Yon to stay alone, so she also buys another cat, Mu, which is this fluffy cat here. And it's really cute and fluffy. And Mu is actually the number 6, or short for the number 6, so she's essentially named her cats 4 and 6, and it kind of reminds you of Lisa Simpson from The Simpsons with Snowball 1 and 2, so it's just kind of funny. It's just sort of a funny take on ownership of pets. I think really any pet owner would kind of appreciate this or understand some of the sentiments in this, and definitely Junji Ito, he's just really good at his absurd reactions to things. He definitely is over the top, and the way he reacts to things is just, there's so much humor in it. But he brings in that horror style that you recognize from Uzumaki and Gyo into this work, and it just pushes the humor up so much. It is just so funny seeing his art style in this. It just works so well in humor. Like here's a picture of his fiancée sort of stealing the cat and wanting to hug it, but you can see that she's just sort of insane and creepy, and like it's horror. You know, traditionally these would be horror illustrations. It just works really well. It just works really well in this comic, and I laughed from the beginning to the end. I loved it so much, and I will read it over and over for sure. And the only problem I have with it is it's really, really short. It's only about 110 pages, so it's incredibly short, which is a real shame. It needs at least 100 more pages. And it's so delightful and so funny, and the artwork in it is so great. I loved everything about this. I can't actually think of anything bad to say. Yep, it's perfection, and I highly recommend it. And I can't wait for more Ito to be translated into English, because I'm gonna have to buy absolutely everything that he writes, because he is the greatest. So those were the 5 volumes of manga that I read in March that were my favorite. Definitely I read a lot that were really good, but these ones were really great, and I'm so glad to have them in my collection, and I will be reading them many times over. Okay, so anyway, thanks for watching my video, and I will see you soon in my next one. Bye.